You'd never have to worry about getting mixed up between this slag and the other slag.
Should be several big things, or
Good morning, Jeffrey. How are you? What we're going to do this morning is wanted to do a little show and tell on some of the blacksmith items that we found over the past, 3 decades now. I think Zach might have witnessed some of these items coming out of the ground back in 90, 91, when we had unit labels that were BI4 and then layer J. So I was in graduate school when this one got dug, so I wasn't here. But what we wanted to do is to have the blacksmiths evaluate this material to understand what the actions were that were behind it. Because what we're interested in, like we were talking about yesterday, is not just dwelling on these at the level of the artifact, but looking at these in terms of what it represents in terms of not only specific human behavior, mainly what the blacksmiths are doing at the blacksmith shop, but then also the larger systems of economy that Moses was responsible for as a blacksmith. And there's a couple of these maps drifting around. We'll go ahead and pass this around so you all can see this. I'll do this one from this angle down here. Actually, you can my advantage. So there you go, Paul. So this right here, this is a map of Orange County right here, and this is this one is Greene County over here. And basically, where Montpelier is the orange area in the middle, the orange 2,650 acres right there. And what the stars are is with the Madison-era ledger books from 1776 through 1783, there's a set of ledgers that list all of the major items that are made here. Everything from jumping an axe, and that is
welding a steel into the iron of the axe.
And how long would that take?
What would you say, Todd? About an hour or two?
Yeah, maybe an hour or two, yeah.
So yeah, we're looking
at how good you are at it.
Yeah. Oh, you know how you're doing, how good you are at it, how clean your materials are, how much damage was done to the axe before you jump it off. Because that's a repair job.
You got 2 different metals you're working with. You're working with a wrought and a steel, so you got different heating temperatures, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And this could be unpacked in so many different ways. Because you mentioned steel. This is during the American Revolution, where there is a ban on colonial blacksmiths working with steel. And so whether this falls into that category, we don't know. But one thing we want to evaluate these ledger books for is what's represented in the ledger books, and then what isn't. Are there some, repairs that fall under a threshold and aren't listed? Are they major ones? And this is where working with blacksmiths and knowing like how long it takes to jump an axe, to put that steel back into an axe head, that's where we're going to begin to unpack a lot of this and understand what this customer base represents, and actually start to put some numbers on these stars. And what's really remarkable about this customer base is this is only about half of the customers that we've placed using deed research that a volunteer of ours has done, Ron, who's placed all the deeds in Orange County for any major landowners and owners of enslaved Americans. And so what we need to do is get into Albemarle County, because basically what this is looking like is this is going up and down the Southwest Mountain chain, which is some of the richest agricultural lands and some of the wealthiest landowners and largest groups of enslaved Americans in this region. And this all falls under the Arc of Communities. And Pandora, good morning. As one of the board members for MDC, can you define the Arc of Communities? Not to put you on the spot, Pandora. I'm not here for this.
Well, just briefly, from what I know, because I'm not a part of the full project,
but the ARCA communities consist of the 850 square mile radius from this area of different communities. You've got Fluvanna, you've got Somerset, you've got somebody help me out here. Louisa.
Green.
There's quite a few, so it's early in the morning. This wasn't on the top of my head this morning, but so there are several. Many enslaved communities throughout those areas, and from what the MDC has defined, it's an 850 square mile radius in Central Virginia. So there are quite a few communities in those areas, and to the best of my knowledge, because there were so many families that were broken apart, you had sometimes families that were separated. You had enslaved members who were sold, but they were still connected, and so they tried to stay connected, and so that art was one way of keeping people connected.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. Yeah, that gets into connections that descendants have with each other today, and with designing and planning the memorial for the burial ground. There's who is buried, the over 250 individuals that were buried and carefully placed in that space. The family connections there span all this region. So, like Dr. Michael Blakey, who's from western Orange County and is connected to Barbersville and to Newman family ownership. No paper trail going to Montpelier, but he, has stated, there's no doubt I have relatives in that burial ground. And so what this represents with with Moses's customer base, how these customers are listed is by landowner and owner of the enslaved community, but who's bringing that axe to be jumped, who's bringing that plow to be repaired, aren't, Thomas Barber. It's the enslaved who were working the land, who knew this needed to be repaired and what needed to happen to it. They had connections not with necessarily James Madison, but with Moses, the head blacksmith, or other community members that are here. So this is a network that in many ways serves as the basis for the arc of communities today. This is the origin story for all this. And so the artifacts that we've got here, mainly on this table right here, these artifacts from a unit that was excavated back in '91, and then this that was excavated in just last week, and all the slag that's here, this is all from the blacksmith shop here. So this clipped iron is the outcome of those economic transactions that's shown on the map right here. So so it's really, you think about this, somewhere one of these artifacts relate to one of these stars. We'll probably never be able to make the connection, but approaching that is what we want to do with having a conversation with blacksmiths this morning, looking at these items to see what does this represent. And this is just like the beginning of this analysis. This is to get us started. When we go in for the winter, starting in November, to start cataloging these items, what we want to do is have a better conception of what sort of cut marks, what sort of shape should we be looking for with the iron that we're finding at this site, and the slag as well, to begin cataloging it and organizing these pieces so that we can start to approach, put the connection between what we're finding in the ground and what's in the ledger books. And I'm going to send you all a copy of a report that Scott Parker did many years ago. He and another one of the historians here summarized the account books from 1776 through 1783, and just has a great list of terms, the customer base that we're using to map all this, all the items that are being made, what's happening with those. And again, if anybody wants to sit down, don't stand on your
Chair.
Yeah, there's a chair. So Joanne, you should be sitting down. So are you getting your
I'm a chair.
You're getting your comfy chair. Nice. Okay.
There's folding chairs back here too.
Yeah, lots of folding shears. So what we're going to do is going to start with the 18th century shop, and I'm basically going to dump these items out and then have the blacksmiths look at this, and so yeah, it's this is where like our knowledge of these items. I mean, it's almost akin to like an archaeologist studying indigenous sites in the U.S. and looking at chipped stone tools and never have manufactured a stone tool themselves. It just puts you at a deficit. So having the skills, knowing like what jumping an axe means, what kind of why you clip a piece of iron, all this. And so one thing that we're going to be really hyper focused on is making sure that all the artifacts go back to their home.
Yeah.
So when we pass them around, I don't want to pass around anything unless there is a bag attached to it. And hey, Cass. Hey, could you make up some bags for this inventory number right here? I forgot this one. This one's pretty distinctive because these have not been cleaned. These just came out of the ground. And this is the kind of stuff that you all have been seeing yesterday and this week. This is all from one provenance, one layer from the site, and there's just such cool stuff. Yeah, and actually you were digging this one.
That was my whole thing.
Okay, yeah, so I grabbed this one because I figured you would have, this would be the beginning stage that you'd be like, damn, you're pondering this stuff. So
Yeah.
which bag, Matt? Oh, it is this one right here. Yeah. Don't lose the bag.
Should we jump straight in? It's like,
Yeah, jump
so
straight in.
this was a lot of fun. It was one of those over there. But we got, the usual kinds of odds and ends, clipped iron, discarded pieces of wrought iron that looked like someone was either practicing or just didn't do the right job. But we also got some really odd things, like this. Todd, you behind there? Doesn't that look like a small Hardy?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So which is kind of weird because you've seen the Hardys that we're using over there. They're much larger than this.
Small what?
A small Hardy tool. So this is the tool that would fit into the anvil, and then you would use this cutting edge to cut off a piece of metal. It's a hot cut Hardy.
Like
It's
we cut
just.
the nails with yesterday.
I'm sorry.
Like we cut the nails.
Exactly, like we cut the nails with yesterday.
And one thing to note, what you all did yesterday, you all are light years ahead of what we were before yesterday, like in terms of doing actual blacksmithing, which is so cool.
So this was weird to bring this out of the pit because it's smaller. It's not, unless they had a very small anvil, but it's in actually pretty good condition. So I thought that was a really neat one to see. This one was interesting. Chris and I kind of bounced around trying to figure out what this was. This is a large chunk of metal, very heavy iron, and it's got this weird little kind of trough in the back of it. See the little trough in the back? Best we can figure is that this was someone starting to make an axe or a sledgehammer or some other thing, and they took the metal and they were punching the hole through, and it fractured. As you can see, there's break marks on this side. It's been cut on this side, but it's very clearly that there was something going on here, and the mass of it's so substantial. Can we let people?
Yeah, we'll pass these around.
Okay.
So we'll pass these artifacts around without bags, but before we go to anything else, we need to have everything else back.
Awesome.
Just to
Sounds
be.
good.
So we'll start these here and.
Oh, are those Hardys used for anything except cutting off?
I'll put this over here. And you can
So a
pass that
Hardy
way.
is any tool that can fit into the square hole.
Okay.
Specifically, a hot cut Hardy can be used for making hot cuts, or you can use it to make indentations. Is there any other uses you can think of for a hot cut Hardy other than marking or cutting?
No, not for a hot cut.
No.
Yeah, that's just what it's for. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes blacksmiths are are like refreshingly literal in the naming of their tools.
Can you all hear down there?
Yeah.
Can you all hear us?
Why do they call it Hardy?
Actually, what's the origin of the name for the Hardy hole?
I have no idea. It's a bigger hole, round hole.
It's called a Pritchard hole. And the one next to it's called a Hardy hole. So maybe there's two guys out there who have
Mr. Hardy.
whose names have been passed down to generations and no one remembers who they were.
What, they didn't name one of them Laurel?
That was the missing third hole. I don't want to.
And it could stay outside. It's okay, Todd. You can keep it outside. Just have it be with the bag. Yeah. And we're the hardy. If you pass that down with the hardy, it doesn't have to go in the bag, but just be with the artifact with the bag.
So those of you who were making nails yesterday, and we're gonna do, I think we're doing more nails today. Is that right?
Yeah, we're gonna do more nails today. Absolutely.
We did pull nails out, and you can see the resemblance to many of your nails.
Mine didn't look like
Put it on the ground for 200 years. Let's see what it looks like.
I have a question. Are the horseshoe nails, are they hand forged or are they mass produced?
In 18th century, they're going to be hand forged.
Hand forged. Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Then same with the horseshoes. Horseshoes start being mass produced in early to mid 19th century.
Yeah.
I think that's about the same time as the nails.
They look really consistent though.
I mean, I should have brought my box of hooks from where I do demos, where I'll make like 40, 50, 60 hooks at a demo. They all look the same. You just when you do something enough times, and I don't measure them. I literally just make them and cut them, make them cut them. You put them, lay them out, they're all the same length. So it's just that's that thing. Someone yesterday, Alicia, I think timed me on making the nail. It was 3 minutes 37 seconds. 35. That's all. Hey, that's great. That made me feel even faster. The truth is that's incredibly slow. Is that a blacksmith back then is going to be making these nails much faster, one heat instead of two heats, and I would say probably at least half that time, if not even quicker. Although my son did the math in the car last night, said that would be like 100 nails in like an hour or in a day or so, like that. So.
He did a great job yesterday, by the way.
Oh,
yeah, it was awesome.
Very knowledgeable young man.
He got to go home last night. I had to go to a baseball game, so I didn't get home till midnight.
Whoa.
Thank you, Paul.
But the younger one won his game, so I'm happy about that. So you got this one. Actually is interesting because it looks like a nail on first blush, but I think it actually is a piece of clipped iron. If you look, it doesn't have a head on it. It doesn't even have the rudiments of a head, but it does seem to have some of the texture at the tip of it where it looks like it might have been cut on a hot cut hardy. And I would love to find a really obvious piece of hot cut hardy. You know what I'm talking about? That was really
That's what you found yesterday.
Oh, that's from before.
No, that's the sweet. The sweet.
Yeah, I was looking for a piece that's similar to this.
yeah.
Like so, some of this. Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, you can talk about that.
All right, cool. So, there was no planning ahead for this. Just kidding. Actually, we planned ahead for this. But, one of the defining features that we've been noticing in a lot of the iron, particularly some of the stuff that was dug up earlier, it's just neat to find it in the stuff we're digging up yesterday and the day before yesterday, is indications of a hot cut hardy cut. When we were cutting those nails, remember I said don't cut all the way through, and because it would hit the hardy, it would damage the hardy. Which one of you did? I don't remember who it was, but they went through it, and it actually did damage the hardy. But fortunately, not my hammer. But one of the ways that they prevented that from happening was not cutting all the way through, and they would just break it loose. So last night, before I put out the forge, I cut off a piece of metal, a larger piece of metal, so we can actually feel this little burr at the top. That's where I cut to it, and I broke it loose. And here is the same piece from when we dug out, where you can see that little burr at the top, where they cut it. And I cut mine a little closer, so you have to kind of feel the burr. So you can go ahead and pass that around. You can feel there's a little burr at the top here. You can see where it's almost cut all the way through. You can see where they cut the metal off of there.
And I was looking for the piece that has, we were talking about the other day, whether or not an end would be clipped off because the end of the bar was not acceptable. I don't know if I was looking for it. I think it was in the 1980s excavation.
Yeah, I think it was in one of those other ones.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of them kind of look like that. Here's another piece that you can actually see there's that little ridge at the top there. Where it's very, very indicative of use of a hot cut hardy because there's a slight slope to the cut, and then there's this little lip at the top where they broke it. And Todd and Jeffrey, if you want to jump in here too and talk about it, by all means.
We could add.
I'm sorry?
Is there a bag for this?
We're not going to open any others.
No, she said, is there a bag that goes with that?
That's what
we're going to keep
They're
it.
making them right now,
Mhm.
but in order to keep them separate, we're not going to open any others.
Yeah, we can put this one. You can pass that bag. So to turn the hardy back. And is that one? Oh, that big piece is still going around. Cool.
I tell you what, I will put, if we want to pass it around another example, I'll put it for your hands, so then you can make sure it goes around.
Okay.
More organized.
That sounds good.
Maybe just toss the other. Here's the heart.
Yeah, that everyone's seen the heart. That goes right in there. Yeah. Yeah.
There was a bag for the heart.
Oh, yeah, that.
So this is just a piece of folded iron.
That's the Hardy.
So you can see where the iron was, the iron was folded over on itself.
It's all the same for these.
And what's interesting is that the 1750s Iron Act, which was kind of locking down what the colonial iron makers could make, part of that was a prohibition on sheet iron production. So seeing a piece of sheet iron thrown away in the 18th century is kind of eye-opening. Like you would not want to necessarily do that, and I'm really curious about why we would do this, because I feel like sheet iron you could fold back out again, heat it up, and then try and continue to use it. So I would. This one's really a mystery to me.
Well, that's one thing that Chris and I were talking about yesterday is when you look at the customer base that this Moses Blacksmith is serving. You're like, as blacksmiths who are, somewhat as hobbyists, do you like the difference between a blacksmith as a hobbyist who doesn't have a production schedule versus, where you've got 5 plows that are backed up and 3 axes that need to have new edges put on them? How are you going to respond differently to scrap material than if it's at your own place and would you have more luxury to unfold a piece of scrap like that?
It depends really on your supply and demand economics and time. Is that one of the things that I've pointed out is that I think I was talking to somebody the other day, is that I'm not going to make an ornate hook unless someone very specifically asks me to make an ornate hook. If I'm making a career, I'm going to make the easiest, simplest hook that's functional that I can sell or I can use. I think that in some ways this applies, but if you can't get more sheet iron and you're going to need sheet iron, you're not going to throw away a piece of sheet iron because that's money lost. Just like, you're not going to fool around with something that's burning a lot of coal, because that's also fuel that you're burning up and using. You're going to try to be as economically quick about it as possible. So that'd be one of those things, I guess. You're welcome to chip in here, but
well, from my grandfather's shop, he never threw away a piece of iron. Outside his shop, he had a pile of scrap iron that he would keep. Whenever he wanted to make something, he would go out there and see what was closest and go from there. As far as ornamental things, he made very little of that. It was always practical things that he made.
Oh, could it be remelted?
It can be reworked.
Oh, reworked.
Yeah, so you could take a piece of iron and rework it within its constraints, but at a certain point, if you want to remelt it, you can't do that in the facilities that a typical blacksmith would have. They would need either a puddling furnace or a refinery at the very minimum, or it would be incorporated into another bloomery.
See, and these are like what you mentioned about your grandfather not having any scrap iron that would be thrown away. This is the sort of patterning we're looking for as archaeologists. If we're finding something that is not expected, all of a sudden that's exciting. Because if there's scrap iron here that blacksmiths, in like your grandfather in the early 20th century, or you all as blacksmiths in the 21st century would never throw away, then the question is, why are the Moses and the enslaved smiths who are working here letting that go into the archaeological record for us to find? And how does that relate to the kind of smithing practices that we know are happening here? Where I'm just pointing at the map over there. That's why I'm pointing. Is there's a large customer base that Moses and the blacksmiths here are serving, and then that's where what we're really lucky with this blacksmith shop is when we got the account books that we can look at, and then like that piece that went around that could be from an axe head. Start digging into some of these clues as to what these artifacts represent. The axe head right here. So and what's really amazing about this is and this gets into how we present. What the ultimate aim of this is presenting history to the public and representing the actions of the enslaved community in relationship to everything that happened here, including writing the Virginia Plan in the summer of 1787, Mr. Madison doing that. is, having an artifact that a visitor can see, being able to 3D print this so, visitors can actually handle these artifacts, to actually tangibly touch an object that was part of this production process, was part of the plantation economy. That's one thing I want to have you all think about is like, what really strikes a chord when you think about American history here and the contributions of the enslaved? What is it that's really going to intrigue people? And that's one thing we want to put you all, as something to think about with all this, is how do we effectively tell this story using the blacksmithing items that we're finding, the space that we get, the what you're seeing these 2 days with the blacksmiths doing work with the public, without the public. It's a question. Is it, should visitors be engaged in hands-on blacksmithing, or is that a really bad idea? So there's all kinds of questions to ask with this. But again, there's a story that we want to tell that's a little different than the story, say, at Colonial Williamsburg. At Colonial Williamsburg, it's like a narrow slice in some ways of life about what was blacksmithing. We're looking at how did blacksmithing contribute to the plantation economy of the American South and the colonial South in general, and then more specifically, how does the ringing of the anvil of the hammer relate to the writing of the Virginia Plan in the summer of 1787? And what's really cool about this is, we got the 250th anniversary of the founding of the country coming up, and then soon right after that, we have, the 250th anniversary of the Constitution. And hopefully by that time, that's like 10 years from now, a little bit more, we'll have this site excavated, we'll have more information known about it. And then what plans do we make, with blue sky, thinking, how do we reconstruct what happened here? Do we, what do we have here, with the temple we're never going to take this back to 1787, tear the wings off the house, tear off the 1797, take down the portico and take down the temple. Y'all are laughing. That's like insane. We're not going to do that. And it'd be really difficult for visitors to imagine this space with a rebuilt blacksmith shop right beside the temple. Although maybe that could be done. I don't know. With enough money, this usually isn't the case here. We could reconstruct the blacksmith shop as an experiment and then take it down. That's if someone, was writing us checks for multi-millions of dollars as an experiment. That has not happened yet. Like with the Rubenstein gift, with reconstructing the South Yard, there are elements of the South Yard that aren't right, and we know it. And to fix that would probably mean rebuilding those buildings. Is that going to happen? Probably not. But I'm not going to say not, because, money can determine this. Who knows? So anyways, all this to keep in mind with, what we're trying to do with this. It's, getting at the actions of the enslaved and what happened here, but putting into this larger context so that visitors can understand what they're seeing, and we can tell the larger story of the Constitution and have it all work together. So you pulled a whole bunch of stuff out, Paul. You look like you were...
Well, I was thinking about next things to show, and
Nice.
then how we're going to segue into some of the other items on the other bags.
Yeah, and for we didn't really talk about this. I thought about this morning. What I was going to do is we've got the artifacts that just came out of the ground right there from the unit that's right under the tent right there that you all are going to be probably working in today. And then we've got these that you looked at on Tuesday from the 1980s or early 1990s unit. And then I was going to do a dramatic display of the slag. I'll get to that in a second. And especially after, did you save a pocket of how much slag was produced? It's like,
I took a picture of it.
Oh, you did? Okay. How much? Could you put it in your palm of your hand?
I can fit it in the space of my thumb.
Oh my God.
So go ahead.
Yeah, how many nails were made yesterday? There's like at least 30. Yeah, 30. Yeah. All right. Yeah, everybody had their nail. So.
And we also did the demo where I made the nut at the beginning of it, and I've done my son made several hooks.
Okay.
So it wasn't just a small amount of iron we were using, but the total amount of slag we pulled out of that charcoal forge would fit into the space of my thumb.
Yeah.
Tiny amount, and it was not the same consistency. It was very frangible.
And while you're thinking about this, let's just do the slag.
Well, that's what it says. I pulled out some slag from this one. And
Thi-
here's the slag we pulled out this week. So this is at the minimum amount you're pulling out of that one forge. And so that's quite a bit.
yeah, that's yeah.
And if you're cleaning them out daily,
That would
makes
be
you wonder.
yeah. So if you look over there below the temple, Chris was talking about that yesterday. That downslope area is full of slag, and so you think about how many square feet is over there. I'm always horrible about square footage over there, but that would be thinking about my yard. That'd be about 1/10 of an acre, and that is probably over 500 5x5 units. We need to do an estimate of this to really get a handle on it. So from one 5x5 unit, see if this is from one 5x5 unit from one layer in a 5x5 unit, this is how much slag we got. So if anybody has, this is one bag of the slag, and then the other bag I'm not going to dump out because we went on Bix Proviances. This is the other bag, which is equal in weight. And so this is like this piece of slag right here. I mean, this is obviously from one forge, and how many days is that going to be in terms of slag with a not coal but a charcoal production.
One of the reasons that we can very confidently say this is not a coal slag is that I brought in some of my coal slag, and it is a lot lighter. Do you have it with you?
This is the coal slag right here, so you all can pass this around and compare it. So I'm not opening, just so to keep me honest, I'm not opening any other slag, so we'll pass this slag around, and you'd never have to worry about getting mixed up between this slag and the other slag. So this is coal slag.
Yeah, that's mineral coal.
And then this is the wood slag. So we'll pass this around right here.
Bearing in mind that, so that baggie that he's holding, the slag that you see in that baggie, that's from one demo day with me and my son. So with a coal forge, that's how much a coal forge generates the slag, or what we call clinker in the blacksmithing world, compared to this. And this is the big mystery, is that, at least for me as a blacksmith, when I look at this I go, this is out of the ordinary. This is telling me something's not normal about this.
Now what's not normal about this?
Well, that's an enormous amount of slag to come out of a forge, particularly considering how much I made out of that one charcoal forge. It's just a lot.
So do you think this is bloomery, like refining iron, or
I don't think it's bloomery
melting?
because, as we've discussed, there's no ore here. So you're not going to bring ore here and refine it. I'm fully convinced of that. Jefferson also doesn't mention it, although someone did say Jefferson didn't mention his mom much either. So, but there's a really interesting passage where Jefferson talks about all the iron makers in the area and actually lists them by name, including one that's in the ledger books.
Mossy,
yeah.
Mossy Creek. Yeah.
But I could see this being finery work. So finery work is where you take pig iron and you melt it down, and then you hammer it, and you create the bar iron that's then used or sold. But have you found pig iron?
We have found sections of what we call bar iron, but whether it's pig iron or not, that's what we need y'all to look at and see. So, and that's one thing we've noted, and this is very anecdotal, like in terms of the archaeology, and this is one thing we want to look at, is we have enough units excavated at the blacksmith shop that's down at the home farm. We found very little bar iron there, but at this blacksmith shop, there's more, from previous excavations and metal detector surveys, there's larger chunks of iron that have been found. And whether that's actually bar iron or not, that's one thing we need to look at. And so there's...
that we found a lot of slag down there.
We did, yes.
That bag's full of slag.
This is an amazing amount of slag. But I also don't want to, the extent of this operation. Have they explained how big the footage is of what we're looking at here?
Yeah, this is one thing we're still looking at, is when you look at the metal detector surveys that Dennis has done, the major part where all the flags are right now, that's where we definitely have a major blacksmith operation going on. But as you go across this flat area across here, when you get down to where it drops off to downslope, there's another concentration of slag in that area. And then to the right, there's also more concentrations of iron that we need to explore. And so whether or not all this area is a blacksmith shop, or or activities are associated with the blacksmith, because you think about
charcoal wasn't as
what was being
refined
made
as
here,
we do today.
you've got the blacksmith who would have been the blacksmiths that would have been making straps for, say, a wagon, manufacturing a wagon. You've got the straps that would need to hold the wood together for the wagon. You'd have the wheel making the tire, a wheelwright section of that shop for the wagon, and then there'd also be the carpentry shop for that. And so, and there's a visitor in 1803 that talks about watching, in the period of 4 days that he was here, a wagon being made from wholesale cloth, from scratch. So this kind of level of production that would be happening in this area, doing the riveting, the hot riveting, cold riveting, and I'm just throwing
The
out
average wagon's
terms.
got a lot of iron in it. You don't think of it that way. You look at a Conestoga wagon or anything like that, you just see wood and cloth. But there's an enormous amount of iron in those things. And they actually got really decorative about some of the treatment on that, depending on where they're being built. But there's a lot of pride that goes into making a wagon.
And what's cool about this is there is at least one mention of a wagon that went to the Continental Army, and what would be being supplied to the Continental Army during this time from this blacksmith shop is one thing we want to explore from the documentary records, some of the mentions in that, and then also from the artifacts themselves. Now, one thing that I know Dennis has found with the metal detector survey is what appears to be melted iron. And the kind of the level of production for casting, would that be possible without a larger blast furnace?
I don't know. I don't think so, because what I've been reading about with the with finery forges and puddling forges, the thing you pull out is more like a spongy mass or a gooey mass. It's not really a poured iron.
So a puddling forge is smelting.
So a puddling forge is, again, it's how you reduce pig iron into wrought iron, is you make it soft and malleable so you can then hammer it. And the reason we call it wrought iron is because it's wrought. It's hammered over and over again. And the process of doing that is to drive the impurities, the slag, out of it and to consolidate the iron atoms in line. And that's why wrought iron also it behaves very similar to grain in wood. You bend it and it can break. But that process of wroughting it, or to hammering it out, has to be done after you've already refined, or you've actually bloomed it. So when you take it from the ore, you turn it into cast iron, which is the pig iron. And then you take that and you remelt that in either a finery, which is the older style, or a puddling furnace, which is the newer style. The difference between those two is that the finery is more direct. The finery, you use charcoal, you put the pig iron into it and you melt it directly, and you pull out those they look like blooms, and you hammer those and refine them. With a puddling furnace, it used coal. Coal in direct contact with the iron would introduce sulfur, making the iron very fragile. And so they figured that out. In fact, actually, there was a book recommended by Madison Jr. to Congress, or maybe a pamphlet, that actually is written by this author, whose name I can't remember, that talks about trying to use coal to do this in finery, and finding out that it doesn't work because it's because of sulfur. So that it took the invention of the puddling furnace, which was an indirect furnace. Think about a pizza oven. Is you got a big furnace on this side, and the heat comes over, circles around on a hearth, and that's where they did the puddling. Literally, again, like I said, very literal. It makes a puddle of iron. You pull it out and you work with it. The interesting thing about the finery, and this is one of the things that I haven't talked to you about because I've been reading like crazy for the last week, is that it makes slag very similar to this.
Okay. So this looks similar to a finery.
Yeah, to a finery process. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they would require enormous amounts of charcoal.
So there is an iron furnace called Mossy Creek over in the Shenandoah Valley, and that's taking the iron, raw iron ore, and refining it. The kind of iron that would be shipped from there, would that need this refining process?
It could. It depends. Particularly in the late 18th century, where there's kind of a clamping down on what you can do about refining pig iron into bar stock, because of the 1750s Iron Act. The whole purpose of that was to send pig iron to England, so that England could then do the slitting and the rolling and the I'm blanking on the third thing that they prohibited, the sheet iron, and then ship it back to the colonies. The whole point was to ship it over there. And some of that was fed in part because they were having trouble finding charcoal over there to make iron. They wanted that pig iron for them over there. So they're most likely shipping the stuff out in pig iron. Are they making bar iron? Probably, because again, you've got customers that need iron. You're gonna probably make it. You've got the facilities to do it. If you're making a bloomer, you've probably got a finery furnace. So I can't say for sure.
Otherwise, they have to re-import the iron after it's been refined.
Yeah, and that was the goal of the 1750s.
The mercantilism.
Yeah, it was the ship it all the way to England and back. So think about that next time you send a package, to your neighbor. It has to go to Richmond and back.
And the iron, yeah. And so this would have so if this was a refinery forge, in addition to be blacksmithing and making items, that would be a whole other level of production. And then what you'd expect in terms of to see in the archaeological record, whether it be, is there a structure that would represent that? Is this slag right here the amount that would represent that sort of activity?
And something I was thinking about too, I read last night, so poor Chris got an email at 3:20 in the morning. I tend to wake up in the middle of the night with like ideas.
Sweet.
And is that I've been trying, this has been bothering me a lot. These clipped ends, these are very clearly clipped off the end of iron bars. We find so many of these. Remember we were looking at some of the stuff? I wonder if this is not part of that process. Is that when they
the process of refining the pig iron.
A finery. It's not refining. It's finery. Although I don't know if that comes from refinery, but one of the steps I found written in a text last night was that they start at the middle of the bar, they hammer it out to the ends so that the slag moves to the ends of the bar. And that might be the answer to our question about why are they clipping the ends off of these.
Wow.
These may be bad, and they clip them off because this is the concentration of slag they've got left over. Again, we don't know.
Conjecture.
But this is where I'm trying to leverage some of my knowledge of blacksmithing in to try and answer some of these questions, because we pull these things out. I'm like, Matt asked me to bring in examples of clipped iron, and I'm like, I don't have any because I don't waste iron like that. Todd's not, right?
Force Paul to do this. I was like, just clip an end off your iron. He's like, no, I can't.
Yeah, we don't. To your earlier comment, Matt, about the hobbyist versus the business person, I have several tons of steel in my backyard that I could buy, that I bought from a wholesaler in Richmond. I am not lacking for steel. My wife would love it if I threw it away, but I've got tons and tons of steel.
So there's an incentive to get to waste.
So I'm not. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not throwing it away. And the fact that you've got an entire mountain of it here.
Yeah. Well, there's a mountain of slag, but a good amount of iron. Yeah. This is where it'd be interesting to come up with a catalog system for what are scraps of iron that should be with a blacksmith shop and what shouldn't be, and then start to dive into the area of, is this just a blacksmith shop or is it for refining the pig iron? And then and this is what we need for cataloging these items, because we're going to take these items right here, and in the past we'd separate out the horseshoe nails, we'd separate out the things that were like the hardy that we'd be able to identify, and then there's all these scraps. So some of these that we're getting into is like this has been obviously work that's been arounded.
Yep.
But then all these scraps right here that are unidentifiable per se, but they're clipped iron, which are truly pieces that should be waste, which are pieces that shouldn't be. That's what we need. That's where we're at the stage right now of getting this catalog system in place, so then we can look at what the weight is, the weight of little bits of clipped iron versus pieces of ends of bar that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, like some of the things. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was talking about waste. I just went through a building project, a big building project, and I realized contractors waste a lot. Like they cut 2 feet off a board, it goes in the scrap pile, and at home we would put that in our little pile. The bricklayers were working. They cut a brick in half, throw that half away, and use this half instead of putting the other half. So the same thing is like, okay, we don't need this. I'm a contractor.
Cost per
somebody
hour
else is paying for this.
Yeah. When that piece of wood is like $1 and the carpenter is being paid $20, $30 an hour. Yeah, that's
how big is the standard piece of pig iron, and bar or wrought iron that they would be getting.
I don't know that it was necessarily a standard size. They would sell by weight.
Okay.
So like you buy a ton of pig iron.
In all different sizes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because to make pig iron, what they do is that they would dig a trough in the sand or the clay below the bloomery, and then they would branch off little pigs from the sow. They look like little suckling pigs off the sow. That's where the name pig iron comes from. And then the iron would flow down that trough into those little side pockets. Yep.
Crazy question. Back then, did they out in the middle?
We'll get you.
So, and expanding it out. I can equate that with quilting because you start in the middle and you spread it out. So when you get to the end, you have to square it up. So you do have pieces that are raw that you normally would throw away. So that would make sense.
That's one of the things I'm curious about. There is an iron foundry that's run by the National Park Service up in New York, I think. Saugus Ironworks?
Yeah.
Saugus.
Saugus Ironworks.
Yeah, one of the.
I reached out to them last night because I like harassing people. So I just wanted to see what.
After you texted Chris or emailed Chris.
Yeah. Brain's running at 3:20 in the morning. What am I going to do? So I actually did ping them. So I don't know. They might be like, this is crazy email. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm wondering too. Is that because these are all unfinished ends that are clipped off. I don't know if they're clipping this off because it's got impurities in it, or if they're clipping off because they want a nice finished edge. Because you're going to sell it. I don't know if they're selling it. I would imagine that would show up in ledger books, but we're not seeing that. I don't think.
I don't think they're. I haven't seen.
At least not in Moses' books, right? So it may be just for internal use.
Well, this is where we get science, and where the science of all this comes in with isotope analysis and element analysis to see what is in there. So. And I don't know, looking for, have you, the work that you've done in the blacksmith shop in Texas, have you done any elemental analysis?
Yeah, so we use PXRF, so it's archaeometry, and it's the analysis of the chemical makeup and signatures of the materials. And so we were, and this is giving me a lot to think about because we find a lot of coal, but the slag that we're looking at often actually looks like a lot of this charcoal and stuff. And so maybe he was, our blacksmith is from 1870s to 1890s, and that's why I was asking, confirming about, we're looking at mass industrial produced. And he's at the frontier in Texas, so he's not necessarily getting access the same raw iron. And we're looking at a point where there's alloy and steel production. So that's another question of looking at, blacksmiths can tell the type of the steel and the metal they're working with, but we're finding it, after 100 years in the dirt. So it's not always easy to see the laminate, the wood grain structure, the pitting of the different types of metals. But so doing archaeometry, there's a tool there's multiple tools. One is a PXRF or XRF, X-ray fluorescence, to identify the signatures within a makeup. So for example, you can study this with like obsidian, which has a particular geochemical signature and it has a source to it. So you're like, this obsidian comes from the Black Hills of South Dakota. And so that's what people do with studying lithic workshops and artifact and the circulation of these economies. So we analyze slag, coal, and the metals, and then the challenge is then there's other technologies called like INACP. There's it's a long acronym that does a whole other range of analyses of the makeup of this. The XRF is useful because it's a portable thing. So I have a colleague and they can just take it and shoot these. And the challenge though, so for slag, we've been able to identify, and there have been studies on this, that slag oftentimes keeps the same signature of the metal that you're using. So it goes through the blacksmithing process and you can trace the origins of the tool, the material that you're working. So there's a linearity through it that you can identify. The challenge though then, what we wanted to do was analyze the metal and the makeup of it, because there's different types of carbon, makeup of whether something is more malleable or fragile, and that's what determines different types of metals. And the challenge with the XRF is that it can only get the exterior of the metal. So it can't get into the entire makeup of the piece. So we did a test model to look at all these different elements. The challenge then with sourcing coal is that there's such variability and similarities that it's difficult to necessarily say that this is coal from this lignite mine in West Texas or East Texas. Is this coal from Pennsylvania? So so the XRF and their archaeometry tries to study these things, but we're seeing like where's the limits, where are the possibilities for these test methods.
And one thing that when I don't know if we do this in the field, but definitely in the lab, is we use the magnets to see if we've got magnetic slag or non-magnetic slag, and by far most is non-magnetic.
Yeah, that's what's so amazing. Is you run that magnet over it, it drags a little bit.
Yeah,
but it's not like a chunk of iron. It's not like it's melted iron.
And we've considered whether or not whether there's any. There's one archaeologist here that looked at whether or not there is a sourcing of the, and I don't know if this actually works, is trying to source, similar to what you're saying, whether or not we have charcoal that's made on the property here versus made elsewhere with, and that's something, all sorts of things we need to look at. And you had a question, Esther.
Just a curiosity thing. Back in that time, did they actually make what is known as wrought iron furniture, or is that more in the 19th and 20th century?
Like wrought iron furniture.
Patio furniture.
Oh, I see. Yeah, like the. I don't know of any that I know.
It's, I mean, probably not here. Like for instance, the bed in there that was originally cast iron, it came from France, I think. So like the heavy industrial stuff like that, I think most of the correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the smiths around most of the smiths this time period are going to be more utilitarian. It's not to say that Madison didn't want to make something fancy. He's not going to have his blacksmiths make something fancy. I just don't think that's common.
An example of this is like with the when we were looking at the front fence, some of the architects were considering whether or not there'd be cast iron elements to that front fence, and it was just overwhelmingly that was not the case. It just wasn't the pattern here. Like you have it like for example, a little bit later in New Orleans, and so cast iron, trim decorations just don't appear, and that's I think in New Orleans that starts occurring in the 19th century more than the 18th century. So. But there were during the time, right in the 1848, the railings and the that were put up on the front porch were cast iron, and so those are still in storage here.
It's worth noting. I was reading it. I saw several instances in reference to like the early to mid 18th century blacksmiths. There were actually ordinances trying to restrict what blacksmiths could charge because iron was scarce enough that the blacksmiths would charge whatever they wanted for items that you needed. So you're not going to be buying superfluous things. You're going to be getting the very basic. But there are examples of townships passing ordinances saying, yeah, you can't charge this, price capping basically, because it was such a difficult thing to try and get. And there are multiple examples shown of states passing incentives to try and encourage production of iron. It's really fascinating. Like you don't really think about this. Like the time of need or time of want, because we find so much iron. We think of iron and steel as such a ubiquitous part of our world now.
Yeah.
From what we found, is that everything is tool related, I'm going to say, and yet everyone cooks with iron pots and iron things in the kitchen.
Like a cast iron cook pot. Yeah.
But probably not engaged in any of that, except for bales or a bale or something.
Cast iron, you're making that at a bloomery where you've got the iron more liquid at a blast furnace or a bloomery. And you're not making that at a blacksmith shop here.
Could you repair it?
No, actually, cast iron cannot be. Well, if you want to repair cast iron, you have to braise it. And I don't know if they had the functionality to do that. We do that with torches.
I've never seen it here, but and it would be of limited functionality is repairing it with lead, but then you can't get it hot in a fire. Yeah. So, and that's more for
basically
cold.
It's similar to brazing. You're soldering it in that case.
But like the tool you made for the cooking,
Well, that's wrought iron. So they would make wrought iron, like you would make wrought iron pans with sheet iron. You would forge it in a shape, and then you can put legs on it by riveting those on there. But cast iron itself has an extremely high carbon content. You're talking about the carbon identification. The higher the carbon, the harder it is, but the more fragile it is. So have you ever seen I can't believe I'm going to say this because everybody asks me about it. Have you ever seen Forged in Fire? Yeah. So what they talk about is when the blades have too much carbon in them, they snap. But if they don't have enough carbon in them, they go dull too quickly. And so you got to find that happy medium between the two. Cast iron is way off the charts for the amount of carbon in them, and that's why they're really good on compression, but not so good in tension. They can break easily.
And this is where we're probably going to break Paul's household budget.
Already did.
Oh no! So one thing we started finding in some of the older collections, and I don't know if there's any pieces in here, but this sheared iron, where it's cut with a massive pair of shears.
It looks like blacksmith shears, which look like giant scissors.
So if you ever cut tin, like copper or tin, for like cutting up a can, you get that little curly cue.
So I bought a pair. I ordered them. That'll be in next week because I want to experiment. I want to try and cut some heavier gauge steel hot in the forge and see if it makes the shape. There's a weird torque to it. Have you ever cut a piece of tin?
That's this one.
A sheet metal?
And this piece is not sheared.
No, it's not sheared.
But this one is sheared.
I think so. Again, I'm not conclusive, and that's why I spent my fun money for this month. To buy a pair of scissors this big. The person said they were going to ship it to me around $23. I'm like, cool. Probably going to come with a wagon mule.
Well, I think this covers. Do you remember anything else with the 18th century blacksmith items?
No, I think we were just seeing the same clipped iron stuff like that. We had a fun conversation about what to call that, and we decided we came back to clipped iron because there was too much confusion in other places.
Yeah, this we're going to call sheared iron.
Yeah.
So, but this is just all going to be clipped.
My initial concern with this was that it's not clipping. It's clipping like you clip your fingernails. It's basically hammering down, cutting on it. But then after we're talking, we realized there's other typography that uses that terminology.
Like cut nails, which then becomes, and those are not actually cut nails, they're sheared nails. So it's just like, we can't start cutting cut nails, sheared nails.
We can't roll it back.
We cannot roll it back. Yeah, you can't undo it. Can't undo it.
So I want to make sure we keep all these.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, any other artifacts that look fresh that are around? Any other artifacts that are drifting around before we get into anything else? Okay, those two, you can go ahead and pass those around. Just keep those with that bag. And so that's an example of the sheared iron, the thin piece, and then the other one is more what we call the clipped iron, even though it has that curve to it, but it's so thick. Yeah.
So an example we would use to have that sheared iron thing is, again, the frying pan. So say you've got a piece of sheet iron, you need to start with a circular piece of sheet iron to make the frying pan. You're going to heat it up, and you're going to shear it around the edges to cut that circle out, and the waste and trim that comes off of it. That's what I think that's what that is.
We found some little curly cues of like copper or brass. Was that sheared?
Probably was, because I think there's an example in your conserved iron over there of a fork. I think that has a copper or brass collar that would have been around the handle.
That's what this looks like. They were thin and they're kind of rolled up fairly tight.
Yeah, so copper is being worked here as well, which is cool. It's scrap.
Oh.
So it's scrap, just like the clipped iron is. That's sheared iron. And
so we're still seeing clipped iron, but we're seeing a heavier gauge of clipped iron. So it's interesting. So you see that we've still got clipped iron, but look at the size of this clipped iron versus what we're pulling out. Much thicker.
And this.
Do we want to pass this? Or
yeah, let's keep it with a bag.
Yeah.
And let's wait until this piece
comes back in.
goes back in. So. Many of you all got the tour of the 19th century blacksmith site. There's two sites. There's the Farrier site, which is at the bottom of the hill near where the well house is, down at the visitor center. And then the top site is what we call the blacksmith site. What's unique about the Farrier site, and we called it Farrier because there's a lot of Farrier nails, but that's just our designation for it. Doesn't mean it was exclusively Farrier. But that one appears to have a water-powered bellows. And then, what you just noted with heavier pieces of clipped iron coming from there is interesting than what we've got right here. What a water-powered bellows. I know Paul was a little messed up by the thought of a water-powered bellows, because what that would mean in terms of keeping the fire going.
So the reason being is you saw my bellows yesterday. You saw how it only took 2 or 3 blasts, but I got it right back to a bright yellow. I want you to imagine that going all the time with the amount of volume that water-powered bellows would generate. Because that bellows, water-powered bellows would probably be an order like at least as big as mine, if not bigger. And mine are canvas; they're not leather. So I'm actually got a lot of leaking happening in my bellows. So the amount of blast from that would be magnified by an actual set of leather bellows. But
wouldn't the water power, would they have a gear that they could move back and forth off and, have it off on when they needed to heat up and then move it off again?
That makes
sense.
It's
like in the 19th century belt-driven stuff, I'm kind of comparing it to that.
If the poor person at NPS actually does respond to my email, then I'm going to ask about that because I know they had water-powered bellows there too.
And that one is what we think is run off a ram pump, because there's a 1908 DuPont map that shows in that exact spot there's a ram pump there, and then that ram pump in the early 20th century was used to pump the water from that stream up to one of the water towers here on the upper part of the property by the pony barn. And then Dennis, and I think you were there, Tony, when you found that lead pipe. You all located a lead water pipe down in that area leading down to where the ram pump is. And the only place we find lead pipe is associated with 19th century sites. And then there's a later dating iron pipe that we found in a unit. Actually, you dug that one. Yeah, that was Lizzie's baby, that trench where there's an iron pipe in the bottom of that. Yeah. And that one had, you found Civil War artifacts, a button from the Civil War.
Yeah, Civil War button, and then enough slag that it weighed as much as a 5-year-old child.
Yeah, that was our estimate for that amount of slag. It was pretty incredible. So, but the Civil War artifact indicated that ram pump was probably still being used all through the 19th century into maybe the early 20th century. So all kinds of research that need to be done at that site.
The reason I kind of balked at the water power pump is that it's not so much a matter of continuous blast, is that that's a huge amount of infrastructure to build when if you're just doing blacksmithing,
a bellow
with hand bellows would work.
Yeah.
So that implies that either they're doing a lot of work, like they've got multiple smiths working around a hearth, or they're doing heavy work.
Yeah, and the account for the water bellows, or the water-powered bellows, comes from a Madison document, and I can't remember the exact context for that document. But
it was Reverend James Madison writing a letter to James Madison, like, hey, there's these water bellows that have become really popular. You should try one because you have the stream right there.
Yeah.
I don't have it.
So were there less fires with the water power?
It would be basically supplying the air for the fire.
Oh, the air.
So it would be running a mechanism that would run a water-powered bellows is like, instead of doing it by hand, it's operating it like a mill. It's like an up and down sawmill. Yeah. So
is the slag actually just taken out of your hot fire when it cools down, just sort of breathe again?
So
as far as air getting through the heating source,
taking clinkers out.
So it depends on how much clinker we got. I tend to hook clinker out while I'm working because I want to keep it from building up in front of the tweer, which is the air hole that's on the front of where the air comes out. If you don't have much clinker, like I didn't have to pull any clinker out yesterday until I put the fire out. And even then I had to look for it, which was kind of amazing. And I don't know, did y'all hook out clinker while you were working?
We didn't have all that much. I mean,
good call.
I don't know, maybe too big. Yeah, maybe a piece about that size. I was amazed. I thought there was more clinker in there than that. So
that's actually really good. I like that. I brought the coal. It's good coal. Yeah.
But that's from the impurities of the coal.
Yeah.
The iron.
Yeah.
Did those pieces of clipped sheared? Oh, awesome. Nice. I want to make sure these get back home BI4.
One thing I'm struck by also though is how the context when we're talking about blacksmiths and their practicality, and yet that quote by Madison is, and what we see here is that there's this tension because there's the people who own the blacksmith shop aren't the blacksmiths. They're people who are really interested in keeping up with the Joneses and sort of these trends and performance of displays of wealth and what are the latest things. So there's this sort of experimentation of both aesthetics and production that don't always necessarily completely reflect that a practicing blacksmith of functionality who's making this, and there's sort of this conspicuous consumption and practice of that I do think adds another layers of dimension of this landscape of production.
And you see that in agricultural production as well, because in the early 19th century, Madison starts in his letters between Jefferson and other planters and enslavers in the area, starts writing about scientific agriculture and manuring of fields and contour plowing and building threshing machines. And so, yeah, and whether that gets into like the blacksmithing as well, because that would have been pretty prominent. Yeah. Okay, I thought you'd. Cool. Yeah, and one thing, this really got demonstrated to us 2 weeks ago when we were doing a masonry program. And part of the masonry program that we did was building a lime rick for burning oyster shell down to quicklime, or and that would be used to make the lime putty for making the mortar for the masonry program. Is the amount of, you've got, with the blacksmithing, there's the labor that goes into, producing the iron items, doing the blacksmithing. But then one of the major things that's needed with blacksmithing, which we've talked about, is the fire for heating the iron. And that is all in, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, is in the production of charcoal, or being the collaring of the wood, taking massive supplies of wood and then reducing it down to charcoal. And so one thing we want to figure out in terms of, like, for every pound of slag that we recover, how many hours, how many pounds, how many, what is the ratio of the amount of charcoal that's needed to fire these the forges that are happening here. Yeah. And so all this adds into the amount of labor, the amount of knowledge that would be had of the land, knowing, for Moses and the other blacksmiths, one thing that would need to be figured out is, how much iron needs to be brought in for certain tasks, and making predictions of what's the level of production for the shop for the year. Because I imagine that, it's not like going to Amazon and just punching in your code and then five days later you've got the iron showing up at the shop. This is probably months, I don't know how long in advance that would be. Yeah. And then the same with the charcoal. If the woods here are reduced to nothing, and you can't produce charcoal in, say, a month period of time to stack the wood and burn it down, because charcoal production takes about a month from beginning to end, but you're having to work with someone who has a wood lot to have that happen, you're talking potentially a year in advance, or having some sort of relationship with, either that, Chris mentioned this yesterday, Madison bought a piece of property to the west of here, or up in Northern Virginia, solely for charcoal production. But in the account books, there are references to charcoal being purchased for use here. So there's all these economic relationships that get into, who Moses knew, who the other blacksmiths knew, how they were connecting not only with the customers but also the supply end of this, because that would have been knowledge in Moses's head that he's having to keep track of. And so, yeah, there's a knowledge of the landscape, there's a knowledge of production costs, production sources. All this is, it's an incredibly complex set of economic and social networks that would have been at play here.